So we had a selling peak here. It's no surprise that with a peak of that nature, that there'd be some buying opportunities coming back into the market, and that opens up the door once again for some buying, which peaked out again here, although there wasn't a good opportunity here to really see if selling pressure was going to start coming in, but it obviously did. We peaked out again here, we peaked here, we peaked here. There's just tremendous amount of selling pressure coming into the market. And what's interesting is that it's extremely rare for the 21 period MarketXFactor to hit above the 80% level, because it is a 21 period moving average of the real-time MarketXFactor. Once we do hit that 80% level, which we did right here, it's a significant event. That means that there was, for a 21 period average of MarketXFactor, there was so much, 80% of what was going on in the market was to the sell side. So even though I wasn't going to suggest this, I did suggest it at this time, that the peak of the selling pressure really came in at this moment in the market. This was the peak of the selling pressure. You can see what basically happened after that is we basically went sideways. There was a little bit of a rally here. And this really was the beginning of some buying opportunities. Some people have obviously seen that, yeah, there's a significant drop off here. We're going to start stepping in and buying. There was another peak. There was another peak right here of selling pressure coming into the market. You can see at this low, actually the peak was here. The peak of the selling was here. So then you could determine based on that, and you can also take a look at the 21 period moving average of MarketXFactor, that the selling on this at this level was significantly lower than this one, which means that it opens the door for some buying to come into the market. So this was the actual peak of the real-time selling pressure right here. The market continued to decline to this point, but you can see from MarketXFactor that the selling was significantly less, and it also started to peak on the 21 period moving average of MarketXFactor. So certainly, even though prices had gone lower, and this is almost always the case, that prices continue in the direction of the trend until there is no more selling pressure. The same happens here when there is no more. The buying pressure has peaked out, but prices continue to rise until there is no more buying coming into the market, which leaves the market open to selling pressure. So as we follow this, then you can see that the selling pressure really ended here. The market continued to decline to here, but the selling pressure was much less. The MarketXFactor also was significantly lower here, and then of course it opened the door for a rally. The market rallied up. However, we did not get a very large amount of buying pressure coming into the market at all during that period. In fact, if we take a look at this high right in here, it corresponds with this peak in MarketXFactor, which was extremely low. And it was also, we had a peak here of the 21 period moving average, and the market continued to rally higher. And that's the way it always is. We get a peak someplace in the middle. So that's the point at which you begin to look for a decline. You look for it, but you don't go short yet. You wait for a peak in which there's very little actual buying pressure coming into the market. And we'll take a look at that. That's the peak right there. When you hit a new price peak and you hit low buying pressure, that's the time to go short. And that's also very similar to this point. If you had gone short at that point, provided some significant profits with the market declining from approximately the 10,590 level down to the 9,614 level, a 1,000-point drop very, very quickly. Once again, We had a couple of peaks here. So you could have said, oh, you could have started looking to go long right in here, but then you could see buying pressure was pretty weak, didn't really snap back. Then we had the actual selling climax, if you want to call it, right here. This was in fact the peak in MarketXFactor. We had a little bit more selling coming in, so I wouldn't have gone short yet because that was still above the 80% level. But on the other hand, this was a pretty good, gave us a pretty good indication, which happened right in here, that potentially the selling pressure is starting to decline. We also had a peak here in the MarketXFactor, and at that point, the market rallied strongly. So we came back up to a new high. We had a peak here. Actually, it was at the perfect peak. We had some selling pressure coming into the market, but then the selling pressure started to decline significantly. We had some selling coming in. The next really significant peak came here as the market advanced. It also created a peak in a MarketXFactor. And you can see that the actual peak in this particular rally on the 21 period moving average happened back here, which was right in this area here. So we had the actual peak in the 21 period moving average here. The market went higher. We had a significant, we started to look at this point after a significant rally for the market to start to decline after this peak here. The market kind of went sideways for a while. Sideways, there was a few little rallies here. This little rally here that ended here would have been the signal to go short once again, because even we made new higher highs, but you could tell that the buying pressure was significantly lower. So that was the most opportune time to go short the market. And right after that, we went from 10,700 all the way down to 99.39. Once again, we hit the peak. I'll show you here. We hit the peak of the selling pressure. Unfortunately, this period right here in which you don't see any lines whatsoever is a period in which the NYSE had trouble sending out data. So there's a loss of data in here, and I'm not really sure what that signifies, but there was a loss of data coming from the NYSE. That's why those are blank. However, we do have a peak right here. You can see it was above the 80% level, which corresponds to this low right here. And then once we have that peak, we begin to look at reduction of selling pressure. And we got that just a couple of days later. We could see that this little bit of selling right here really was insignificant. It was below the 80% level. So at that point, you want to look for a buying opportunity. And in fact, the market did rally from that point. It came back down again, but we saw very little in the way of selling pressure. I think it's right in here. Actually, it's down in here that the little peak in selling pressure from here was created. And that very light selling pressure corresponded to this low right here, and afterwards the market started to rally once again. So you can identify both the lows based on finding the first after a downtrend, finding the peak in the real-time MarketXFactor, and then looking at retest of that lower or continued lower on significantly lower selling pressure, which gave rise to the current rally that we're in.